Okay, so this is the first time that we're going to actually encourage you guys to use your calculator and use it often. Now that you've been tested on how to find X-intercepts and Y-intercepts and all sorts of stuff with graphing, domain, and range, now we're going to use just one more tool, the graphing calculator, the TI-84, in order to speed things up a little bit. So go ahead and go grab your calculator. You're definitely going to need this throughout the whole lesson. You're going to want to practice these buttons. You're going to forget a lot of the steps here, but all of this is also provided on a piece of cardstock so that you can remember how to do all of these steps. Just like, getting used to a phone, the first time you try texting or sending an email through a brand new phone, there's always a learning curve. So the same thing applies here. Once you guys practice this enough times, you will remember and just memorize these keystrokes. So go ahead and grab your calculator and let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that your calculator is correctly formatted. So one of the things you want to do is go to your format menu, which is going to be second zoom. And here I want to make sure that everything on the left side is highlighted. For you guys, your calculator probably looks like this. So I'm going to go to second zoom and everything on the left side here should be highlighted. Okay? Alright, now anything that's not highlighted you're just going to scroll down to and just hit enter on it. So if I wanted to switch on to grid on, I would scroll over to grid on and then hit enter. So I just took it off of the grid off. I want to go back to that. But anyway, so that's something that you want to do. Just make sure that you can graph properly. To go back, sorry, keep moving this around. To go back to the home screen, you're just going to hit second, quit. And then I want you to go into your mode, the one that's highlighted right here. Just go into your mode and make sure everything on the left is also highlighted, okay? Alright, so now let's go to actually graphing. Alright, so we're going to type into our calculator here y equals 1.5x, or 1.5x plus 6. Alright, so I'm going to go to my y equals. Just real quick, do you see how this plot is turned on? I want to turn that off. I'm going to go all the way up to here and hit enter. If you have multiple plots on, go ahead and turn those off right now. We won't use those until a couple more days, but you won't be able to graph. Also, make sure that everything's cleared out. Do you see how I already have a function here? Make sure you clear this out, and you also scroll down all the way down to 10. Because sometimes there's like crazy wild, like, a divide symbol here. And when you go to try to graph that, like let's say I have a bunch of stuff in here. When I go to try to graph that, oh, my calculator's freaking out. And I don't see that, it's going to give me an error message. So make sure everything's cleared out and just go scroll all the way down, hit clear, and you're good. Alright, anyways, it doesn't really matter where I put this y equals 1.5x plus 6. I just like to put it in the first line so I can see it. But there, I'm going to enter that and I'm going to graph it, and right now I don't really see, it's kind of thinking. Whenever you see your calculator moving right here, it should be thinking, so you just kind of want to wait. Well, I'm not seeing anything. Your calculator might actually give you a nice picture, but because mine isn't and some of you might not get a good picture, I'm going to hit zoom and then go to standard. So zoom 6 is going to be my standard key. And I know that this graph should look like a line, and now I'm seeing an actual line. This zoom standard goes from a range of -10 on the x-axis to +10, and -10 in the y value to +10 in the y value. So that's something that you want to make sure you're like making sure that your graphing and your graphing calculator are matching up. So I know this is supposed to be a line. If I don't see a line, something's wrong with my calculator and I need to adjust the view screen. Okay, now I can also change the window that I'm like picturing by hitting this key window, and here you can see the range. It's going from -10 to 10. This is the x min, x max. The scale is 1. I don't really ever adjust the scale, but you definitely can if you want to. It just goes back to the tick marks. If you go look at the tick marks, each one represents 1 unit. If I go back to the window here, the -10 to 10 is also the range for your y scale. Okay, now let's say I wanted to see more of the graph. Well, I'm going to increase that by setting maybe -30 and to +30 here. And now I'm going to see a lot more of the graph going across, and now it looks actually like a steeper slope. But I'm still getting a picture of a line. Alright, now that's just a really basic intro. What if I asked you to graph something that you don't necessarily know what it looks like I guess 500x minus 300. So let's graph this next line here. Y equals 500x minus 300. And I kind of have this little thing on the front page here, finding an appropriate window, that there's no really right window but you can have a wrong window. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to graph y equals 500x minus 300. And actually I'm going to scroll down to get rid of that other line that I had, because I don't want that other line in there. So I'm going to clear that out. Whoops. Go back. Oh, I hate this thing. There we go. Alright, I'm going to hit graph. And voila, I see 0. I see nothing of my line. And that's because my calculator is so zoomed in. Right now, remember we changed our window to -30 to 30. So that's all I'm seeing. I'm only seeing a very small portion of this overall graph. And I know that this is supposed to be, you know, a line. So obviously I need to adjust my window. So we can kind of do a couple things to see, like this question here, it says what happened? Nothing, basically. We didn't see anything. And is this what we expected? No, not at all. We're supposed to see a line here. So we want to change a few things. What we can do is look at our table. If we're not certain what type of values we should be looking for, we can go to our table. So this little table key is actually right above the graph. You're going to hit second table. And now I see some values. At 0, I'm all the way down at -300. Okay? So I actually want to set my table here by doing second table set. And the table start, I can adjust this and start at -1 or -5, whatever I want. But now you can see when I go back to my table that now that value is popping up at -1. So to set your table, it's right here under table set. To actually view your table, you go to second table, which is right above the graph key, and that's how you're going to look at some values. So now that gives me a really good indication of what I want to see. I already can see that I'm going down to -800 and up to +2200 in a very short span of numbers. From -1 to 5, I'm jumping all over the place. So in my table, in my window, I want to adjust it, and I already have it written out here what I would like you guys to adjust it to. So let's do our x min at -1, our x max at 1. Let's have our scale go up by 0.1. This time I am adjusting, because if I just went up from -1 to 1 with a scale of 1, then that's a very large tick mark. And then -800, 200, and 100 for the scale. It doesn't have to change though. Actually, let's do it both ways. I'm going to graph this real quick so you can see. And now I'm actually getting the shape of a line. Okay, again, your calculator can't show you anything you're not asking it to show it. So you need to specify what window you want to see so that you can see your function. If I go back to window and I change that scale right here to 1, it's not really going to change the picture much. You're just going to get a whole bunch of, like now it's a solid black line because it's trying to graph a scale of 1 on each one of those, so that's why it's a solid black line now. But anyways, you get the idea, okay? Alright, so let's go back to our notes here, and now we're entering a new function, y equals 4/5 x minus 350. So there's a couple things that I want to do when I look at this. I say, okay, the y-intercept here is -350. So that's going to help us determine what our minimum y value should be. I want to see more than just, you know, the y-intercept of the graph. I also want to see the x-intercept of the graph. So if I try to graph this, and let's do it according to this window here. Let's go back to the graph here. Go back and change this to 4/5 x. When you enter this, there's a couple ways you can do this without making any mistakes. You can always, anytime you enter a fraction, put it in parentheses. So this is 4/5 x minus 350. You could also put it as 4x divided by 5 minus 350, but you should not put it in, I'm going to do it the wrong way here. Don't enter it as 4/5 x like this, because really what this is doing is it's dividing 5 and then multiplying. So you don't want to enter it like that. All right, so anyways, let's graph this. Let's change our window. Well, see, that's the old window that we had, and I'm getting a horizontal line, which I know that that's not supposed to look like a horizontal line. So I'm going to go to my window now, and I'm going to adjust it according to this window that's given in our notes. So from -10 to +10, 1, -400, +400, and 20. Okay. So now when I look at this, I'm kind of seeing a better line. It still looks horizontal. This is not a great picture right now, because if I look at my table of values here, you see if I increase from -1 to 0, I don't really have much of an increase in my table values. Like the last one jumped up really quickly. So what I want to do now, so this is different than the last problem because if we look at our table values before, they jumped up so quick, right? We went from like, I think, something like negative 800 to positive 2200 in the same interval of x values. So here, the x values aren't really causing a huge decrease or change in our y values. So what I want to do now is see more of the x values here. So I'm going to increase the window in the x direction from negative 400 to 400, which is what the next window right here has me doing. Okay, so now we're up to this point. We're going to change our window to these values, and when we graph it, now I get a little bit better of a picture. Okay, so you can see that this picture matches here. The problem is though, let me move that over, our graph does not show the x-intercept. Okay, we want to know, we want to get the best picture of your graph, whatever function type it is. It wants to include the y-intercept, any x-intercepts, and then any type of changes in your graph like a vertex. So now I want to increase, since I can't see over here, I'm basically asking my calculator, zoom in over here, right? Well, I want to increase then the x max. If I increase that x max, and I can actually decrease the x min if I wanted to, but I don't have to here. Now I'm going to get a clear indication of where that x-intercept is. Okay, so there is no right graph. There's no right window. Your window is going to come from being able to see all of the function. So there's not like one specific value that you need to have for everything in here. You're going to have to play around with your calculator. Okay? All right, let's go to the next problem. Okay, so this next portion of the notes, this is the most important piece because this is going to be brand new for you. You guys haven't really done a lot with your calculator, I don't think, in the past. So what we're going to be doing now is testing you on whether you can use your calculator to find x and y intercepts. So, you know, you've done this already with linear functions where you find the x-intercept, you find the y-intercept, you let x equal 0, you let y equal 0, and you solve for the opposite variable. But here we're no longer asking you to do that. So if you continue to use like the algebra that we've already tested you on in chapter 3, you will continue to receive no credit. You need to be able to use your calculator and use these functions here on your calculator in order to solve for those, you know. Okay, so we're going to begin by graphing this new function here, and it's an absolute value function, okay, right here. Oops. So we know a few things about this function. One, we know that it opens up because this value here is positive. You also know that it's a shrink, and you know the vertex. Okay, so we know the vertex of this function is at 7, negative 345, and then from there it opens up. So if we wanted to see most of this graph, we have to keep this number here in mind. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a second. But first let's work on entering that in your calculator. Okay, so I already entered the 5/6 here. Now for the absolute value, you actually want to go to Math, which is this button that says Math. Scroll over to Number, and that first one that pops up, absolute value, hit enter. So now you're taking the absolute value. Some of your calculators might not switch to math type like this. You might actually see the word ABS for abs with the parentheses. That's fine. You're just going to enter it right into there. So my calculator is upgraded a little bit because the software is a little different. So you should be able to enter it though right into here. So let's type in x minus 7, and then scroll out of that by hitting the right arrow key. Or if you have like the old school abs show up, close the parenthesis and then hit minus 345. So minus 345. All right, now if I try to graph this, because I have that old window, I actually get to see a lot of this. But let's say I'm graphing this for the first time and I'm in Zoom 6, the standard mode. Well, I'm not going to see any of this graph. Did you see how that was thinking up in the corner and now it stopped? So this is the graph that your calculator is displaying for you, and you're not seeing anything. So what you need to do is look at what your function's minimum value is and go from there. So if you want to see the minimum value, which is at negative 345, I don't want to just cut it off at the very end, so I'm going to put this at like maybe negative 400 so I can see more below the graph. And the y max, let's keep that maybe at positive 400. Let's get a big y-axis here, and then we'll see how that looks. Okay, I'm getting that straight, almost horizontal looking line, which means now I have to increase my x min and x max. So let's do negative, let's try 50 to positive 50. And notice I'm not really changing the scale anymore. I don't really care about that as much. Okay, now I'm getting a slightly better shape, but it's not that great. I can kind of see now that it's trying to look like a V, but I also don't have any of the x-intercepts, or the x-intercepts here are completely missing. So I'm going to go back to my window and then adjust again. So this is trial and error. You just do it a bunch of times until you can see a better picture. Okay, this might not even be enough for me to see, still not enough, right? I can't even see the x-intercepts, either of those, so let's go back to the window and keep adjusting. Let's try negative 600 now. Let's jump up a lot. This time I hope it actually does show the whole graph. Okay, so now I have a better idea. The only thing is this actually looks like it's the y-intercept at 0 comma some number here, but I don't know what that number is, so we're going to do both of these things, finding x-intercepts and y-intercepts with our calculator. Okay, so now that we have a better picture, we can actually calculate this x-intercept. If I try to calculate that x-intercept without it being seen in the graph, your calculator will spit out an error at you. It'll say error message not in the domain, or some kind of weird message. That just means that it can't calculate anything that it can't see. So it must be able to see it in the picture before it actually calculates the x-intercept. So we have two different x-intercepts. So I'm going to find this first one on the right hand side. What I do is I hit second and then calc, which is right above the trace key. See that word calc? So you're calculating a value. That's how I remember where the key is going to be. And you're going to look for a 0 of the function. So you're going to scroll down to 2. These are called zeros of the function. So it asks you for a left bound. This just means go to the left of this point. So if you were on, now you got to scroll all the way up there. My calculator is going to take a while. Yours is probably going to be much faster. So if I was on this x-intercept here, to the left of that, I just hit to the left key, hit enter. It doesn't matter how far left of this you are. I could be all the way down here and that would be fine, but I just hit enter. And now it asks me for a right bound. Now I go to the right side of this x-intercept, so somewhere over here. Again, it doesn't matter where you hit enter. You see how you have these two things? This is showing that in between those two values is supposed to be your x-intercept. Now it's going to figure out exactly where that x-intercept is. When it asks you to guess, just hit enter. You do not need to guess. And now, oh, I just got rid of it. I think it flashed up for just a second and said 421. Sorry, let's do that again. What a bummer. Enter. Enter. There we go. So 421, 0 is the x-intercept. That's one x-intercept. Okay, so 421, 0. Now, let's work on finding the other x-intercept. So now you're going to do that same process. Second, calc. Go down to 0. Hit enter. Now I got to go all the way to the left side. It's kind of moving pretty quick. And I'm going to stop here because that's on the left side of this point. So I want to be to the left of that point, hit enter. Scroll down, go to the right side of that 0, hit enter. And guess, hit enter again, and I get negative 4070. So those are my two x-intercepts. Alright, now let's find the y-intercept using the calculator. Okay, this is going to be a slightly different way of doing this than what we just did. So here, I'm also going to go to second calc for the y-intercept, but this time I want to pick a certain value, a particular value. We know that for every y-intercept, the x value is 0, so I'm just going to plug in 0 here, and it's going to spit out where that function is equal to 0. So at x equals 0, we have negative 339.1667. So 0, negative 3, I already forgot it, 339.1667. Okay? Alright, now let's fill in the information based off of what our graph is. This is going to be what your homework looks like tomorrow. You're going to be able to graph all sorts of different absolute value functions and linear functions, finding the correct window, looking for the domain in the range, and all that good stuff. Alright, so to fill out this first portion, I just need to look at the window that I picked and just fill in and copy this information right into here. Okay, x min, x max, x scale, y min, y max, y scale. That's pretty easy. I'll let you guys do that yourself. Now, for the domain and the range, though, I actually want to pull this picture over here. Let's take a look at the picture of that. Where did it go? There it is. Picture. There we go. Okay. So now I can blow this up and we can look at that. Alright. Well, the domain of this function, since it's going through to the left and to the right, is going to be all reals. Now the range, this function has a low point. And luckily for you, you already know the low point. Since that vertex was at 7, negative 345, this value is the lowest that y value is going to ever be. So we have a range of y is greater than or equal to negative 345. The x-intercepts we already solved for. I believe it was like 421 and 0, or 421, 0, and negative 407, 0. And the y-intercepts, the last thing we just found, 339.167. Our vertex, you know that too, just from looking at the absolute value function. Okay? Alright, that's basically all you're doing. I just want to recap real quick, so you only found one y-intercept. But again, just to find the y-intercept of this function, you hit second, calc, 0, or sorry, not 0 this time, hit value, and then type in 0, and then it'll spit out the actual function value when x equals 0. Okay? Alright, that's the end of the lesson. Yay, you're done.